On a warm Wednesday night in Charleston, South Carolina, a small Bible study group gathered at the Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. This church wasn't just any church. It was one of the oldest black churches in the South, deeply rooted in civil rights history. The people inside welcomed a young white man who had quietly walked through the door. He sat with them, listened, read the Bible, prayed. That man was Dylann. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that Roof wasn't there for salvation. He was there to slaughter them. 45 minutes into the service, with everyone's heads bowed in prayer, Roof stood up, pulled out a .45 caliber Glock, and began shooting. One survivor said that as he fired, Roof shouted, "You rape our women and you're taking over our country. You have to go." 9 people died. Most were women. All were black. He reloaded 5 times and then, almost casually, he walked out of the building. You might think the story ends there, but it's only getting started. Roof wasn't some random lunatic. His crime was premeditated. He had posted a racist manifesto online. He wore apartheid-era South African flags on his jacket. He posed with guns and a Confederate flag in pictures. He wanted to start a race war. This wasn't madness, it was ideology. When police finally caught up with him 14 hours later in North Carolina, he was calm, even smiling. During questioning, he showed no remorse. He told investigators he almost didn't go through with it because the people in the church were so nice. But then he decided to kill them anyway. In court, the survivors and families of the victims gave emotional testimony, but Roof showed no emotion, no regret. He refused to apologize. In fact, he demanded to represent himself, not because he wanted to win the case, but because he didn't want his lawyers presenting him as mentally ill. He wanted the world to know this was deliberate. The jury took just 3 hours to sentence him to death. Today, Dylann Roof sits on federal death row, alone, in Terre Haute, Indiana. He is the first person in U.S. history sentenced to death for a federal hate crime. He spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. No visitors, no TV, just time. Endless time to think about what he did. And yet, even now, Roof has shown no remorse, no apology, nothing. He told the jury, "I felt like I had to do it, and I still feel like I had to do it." But what you just heard is nothing compared to what happens next. April 15th, 2013. It was Patriots' Day in Boston. Thousands had gathered to watch the city's iconic marathon. Families, friends, tourists. The mood was festive, flags waving, people cheering, cameras rolling. No one knew that in the crowd stood a 19-year-old student holding a backpack that would change everything. That young man was Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. He didn't run, he didn't cheer, he didn't even blink. He just walked calmly to the finish line, dropped the bag, and walked away. Seconds later, the bomb inside exploded, and then another one. 3 people died. Over 260 were injured. Limbs were blown off. Children were thrown to the ground. Blood pooled on the sidewalks. The images shocked the world. But what's even more chilling is what Tsarnaev did next. Instead of hiding or escaping the city, he went back to his dorm room at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. He worked out at the gym. He partied with friends. He even tweeted like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the FBI released surveillance footage showing 2 suspects, White Hat and Black Hat. Dzhokhar was White Hat. His older brother Tamerlan was Black Hat. And now, they were the most wanted men in America. The manhunt that followed was like something out of a war movie. As law enforcement closed in, the brothers went on the run. They carjacked a vehicle, threw homemade bombs at police, and got into a brutal shootout in the streets of Watertown. During the chaos, Dzhokhar accidentally ran over his own brother while trying to escape. Tamerlan died. Dzhokhar fled on foot. For 24 hours, the entire city was on lockdown. Residents were told to stay inside. Armed officers went door to door. Helicopters scanned the neighborhoods. Finally, a homeowner noticed blood near his backyard boat. Inside, hiding under the tarp, was Dzhokhar. When they pulled him out, weak and bloodied, he had scrawled a message on the inside of the boat in pencil. "The U.S. government is killing our innocent civilians. I can't stand to see such evil go unpunished." He was trying to justify it, even then. In court, survivors gave heartbreaking testimonies. One woman described losing both legs. Parents spoke about children who would never walk again. A 29-year-old woman was killed. An 8-year-old boy died instantly. His name was Martin Richard. His younger sister lost her leg. And Dzhokhar? He showed little emotion. In one infamous photo from court, he was even seen smirking. Prosecutors said he was not a misguided teen, but a calculating killer who wanted to make a political statement. He had downloaded jihadist materials. He idolized Anwar al-Awlaki. He even wrote a note inside the boat that called the bombings retaliation for U.S. wars. He was found guilty on all 30 counts. 17 of them carried the death penalty, and in 2015 a jury sentenced him to death. But the story didn't end there. In 2020, an appeals court overturned the sentence, saying the jury might have been biased due to intense media coverage. However, in 2022, the Supreme Court reinstated his death penalty. Now Tsarnaev is locked away in ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. He's in the most secure prison in the US, spending nearly all day in solitary confinement. His name still sparks outrage, not just because of what he did, but because of how coldly and calmly he did it. A college student with a smile turned terrorist. No remorse, no shame. And when the day comes that he's led to the execution chamber, there will be millions who believe justice was finally served. Just when you think it couldn't get any darker, it does, because Brandon Bernard was only 18 when he helped burn a woman alive. It started with what looked like a carjacking. Two youth pastors, Todd and Stacy Bagley, were just trying to do a good deed, offering a ride to a group of teenagers. But those teens had other plans. After forcing the couple into the trunk, they drove them around for hours. Stacy and Todd prayed. They begged. And then a gunshot ended Todd's life. Stacy was still alive in the trunk when Brandon poured lighter fluid over the car and set it ablaze. She died screaming. Brandon would later claim he thought both victims were already dead. But prosecutors didn't believe him, and neither did the jury. Still, years later, even a few jurors admitted they regretted the decision to send him to death row. But regret wasn't enough to stop what was coming. In December 2020, Brandon Bernard was executed. His last words were an apology. "I'm sorry, that's the only words that I can say." And yet somehow the next case was even more disturbing. Because Lisa Montgomery didn't kill for money. She didn't kill out of anger. She killed for a baby. She traveled hundreds of miles to meet a pregnant woman she'd met online, under the lie of buying a puppy. But when 23-year-old Bobby Joe Stinnett let her inside her home, Lisa attacked. She strangled Bobby with a rope, and then, using a kitchen knife, cut the unborn child from her womb. She took the baby and fled. It was a crime that sounded like something out of a horror movie. The woman's mother found the body, and the empty womb. By some miracle, the baby survived. Lisa was caught the next day after trying to pretend the child was hers. Her execution came nearly 2 decades later, and when it did, she became the first woman executed by the federal government in nearly 70 years. But death row holds more than just extremists and manipulators. It also holds monsters who preyed on their own children. Alfred Bourgeois was one of them. He had just gained custody of his 2-year-old daughter. Instead of raising her, he tortured her. He beat her, burned her, slammed her into the window of his truck. Her only mistake? Spilling her potty seat. When the autopsy came back, even veteran examiners said the injuries were the worst they'd seen. The trauma looked more like what you'd expect from a car crash, not the hands of a father. He never apologized, never even spoke her name in court. In 2020, Alfred Bourgeois was executed. He refused to say any final words. But not every killer on federal death row was silent. Wesley Perkey took a teenage girl off the street, raped her, killed her with a hammer, and then burned her body in his backyard. As if that wasn't enough, he also killed an elderly woman with polio by stabbing her repeatedly and setting her house on fire. When the time came for his execution, Perkey tried to claim mental illness, that he no longer understood what was happening. The courts didn't buy it. He died by lethal injection. And then there's the case that barely made headlines, but left even police officers shaken. Dusty Cooper tortured his own cousin for hours in a barn. Chains, a blowtorch, pliers. It was revenge, he said. The cousin had stolen from him, so Cooper made sure he paid. The torture was so brutal, even the jury gasped during the evidence presentation. When asked if he felt any remorse, he lit a cigarette and said, "He got what he deserved." That was enough for the jury. Death row was where he belonged. These are the men and women the U.S. federal prison system has marked for death, not just because they killed, but because of how they killed. Cold, calculated, without mercy. They sit now in silence, steel bars, cement walls, no escape, just waiting for that final walk. and one by one, they will be called.